Like most business owners spend all this time getting the client to buy. The moment they buy, the owner is no longer involved. Ultimately, the result of that is the client, yeah, they bought the product, but their experience kind of sucked. The owner just kind of stepped away and let someone else take it from there. Where if you were to get them to buy and then nurture them all the way through the process, that experience to them is something that they'll never forget. We forget how important that is after they buy. And we just go right into, all right, who's the next person to buy?
Hey everyone, it's time for Design Development, your hub to learn direct from top professionals in real estate design, development, and construction. I'm your host, Renz Hayes, founding partner at H&O, lifelong learner, obsessed with high-powered organizations and the leaders that guide them. If this is your first time on the show, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're a returning guest, can't thank you enough. Let's get to the show. We're going to love today's conversation with Nick Schiffer. I loved today's conversation so much. Nick and I just jumped right into conversation about leadership, entrepreneurship, and business, so much so that we just started talking before recording and trying to do the podcast. The conversation was so impactful. We just hit record and let it kind of fly. And then we take a few minutes to actually come back and kind of set a theme to the conversation. We jump back into his humble beginnings, but he was designing a business. He was building sheds when he was in high school. And that's like kind of the launch the entrepreneur journey for him. But he is what I would say is a media mogul. He's ahead of me. He's been doing so much on Instagram, YouTube, podcasting. He's been doing this stuff for years, and it has been instrumental in his business, NS Builders, which is a premier custom single-family home builder. It's even launched 2 other companies you're going to learn about today. He does cohorts, masterminds. He's a public speaker. Nick's doing everything I say. He has more hours in the day than we do. But without further ado, let's dive right into mid-conversation with Nick Schiffer. I think I'm going to roll with this and let this just launch the whole podcast.
Let's go.
I think this is a great start. I do want people to know most people probably already know you because you've been out there. You're the media mogul. I'm almost walking your path and learning from you, right? So you're now a media mogul, founder of NS Builders. Is it Materia? Is that
It's
right?
Materia, yeah.
Materia, Millwork, Motif Media. We have you're doing masterminds. You're doing like everything under the sun. I'm pretty sure you have more hours in your day than my day, but we'll get to
Negative.
I'd like to, before we dive into all that stuff, I want to go back to your beginnings. You're a huge advocate for the trades. You went to a trade school yourself.
I did, yeah.
I think you didn't choose the entrepreneur life. The entrepreneur life kind of chose you very early. I think you were like building sheds in high school.
Yeah.
So you want to tell our listeners a little bit about you and kind of where you came from and that insight into how you started building sheds.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, my whole life I was always infatuated with building and carpentry. And as a kid, built forts in the backyard, built a shed, took it down, turned it into a treehouse, took it down, built it into a half pipe. The natural progression of 2x4s and plywood in my backyard. My father owns a fence company in Stoughton called Canton Fence. And went to work for him when I was 11 years old. And he, after school or on, during the summer, making $15 a day. Found out I was making below minimum wage, stormed in my grandfather's office, and I was like, I want $5 an hour. And he told me to get the F out of there. And then
I look back to, I grew up working in the family business. And as I've grown as a business here, I look back like I had such a phenomenal return on my compensation as like a teenager. It was like incredible.
He ended up giving me the $5 that day, an hour. And then I found out it was actually $6.25. So then I asked him again, but, when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, going to the movies with my friends, I'm like, I'll pay. Because I had $200 in my pocket. I had nothing out. Like I had no bills.
No expenses.
Expenses. So it's just like cash in my pocket constantly.
Mm-hmm.
But, so I worked for my dad my grandfather and my dad took the business over in 2001. But I worked in there as, labor. I cleaned up the shop, and then I kind of took a knack to the wood shop. I was building fence panels, gates, custom exterior woodwork. Taught myself to weld. I started making all the steel gates for the chain link stuff. Did some install, did some customer, management, sales, but primarily ran the shop and the fabrication, and worked there until I was 22 years old. And so all the way through high school, all the way through college. And then when I graduated college, I was offered a job with a developer in Boston to be on an assistant super, which turned into an assistant PM, which is where I met Jeremiah, your partner. And I was a PM on a high-rise project. But before that, when I was working for my dad, fence company, people come in, do you guys sell sheds? And my dad's, no, we don't deal with them. And it just kept happening. And I was like, I can build a shed. So I think I sold my first one to one of my teachers when I was 15. And it was, if I remember right, like 10 by 12. Because I think that was the max you could build without a permit, because I didn't know how to build a permit and I didn't want to deal with that. But, and at the time, my grandmother worked at a lumber yard, so she helped me order the material. And then my mom dropped me off in her minivan at the job, and I sat there on the ground until the lumber truck showed up. So I'm a 15-year-old kid. I haven't hit puberty, so my voice is still really high. And this truck pulls up and he's like, hey, I'm looking for Nick. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. That's, and he's like, okay, where do you want the lumber? I'm like, right here. And they dropped the lumber, and for 2.5 weeks, I just sat there and hand built this shed for my teacher. And then it just was one after the other. And,
how cool is that? Yeah.
And in high school, they started calling me Shed Boy because that's all I would talk about. And I remember so I'm 15 at that point. So I was kind of annoying in high school in the sense that I knew that what I wanted to do, that I was already ahead in certain aspects of it. And I went into my freshman year with a portfolio of my carpentry work for the carpentry shop. And the teachers were like, yeah, no problem, man. You can be in the shop. And there was a time where I think it must have been the end of freshman year that the teachers had called my parents, and they were like, hey, we want to put him with the juniors just for the shop class. And my parents said, absolutely not. The kid, Nick's going to get his ass beat. He needs to be with the kids his age. It's just not going to be a good situation if they put this freshman kid with the juniors or sophomore with the seniors. It's just not, it's not going to be a good scene, which they were right. And ultimately I ended up taking more of a leadership role in my shop class and helping.
Yeah, you show up to the juniors with your portfolio.
Yeah. And they're like,
in the locker.
They're like, hey, yeah, exactly. Why don't you come over here, bud? Interestingly enough, one of them ended up, one of the seniors, when I was a sophomore, ended up being a really good friend of mine. And in high school, I jokingly said that one day he would work for me. And he was not happy about that comment in high school, but later on in life ended up coming to work for me.
How cool is that?
And it's super, to look back, it's funny, but, and now he's off doing site work with, his true love. But yeah, I mean, in high school, so, I just was always doing sheds, and that kind of evolved into carpentry, and I just started doing carpentry on the side. Even when I worked for the developer in Boston, doing high-rise project management, I was still doing carpentry, kind of on the side.
So you're entrepreneurial, already have kind of taste of what it is to be independent and successful and get work and build something, and you're confident in your skills. You went to a trade school. What triggered you to go to college and then work for a developer in Boston?
So nothing, that was not internal. So the college was really kind of pushed on me from my mom. My dad was like, dude, just come work for, well, he didn't say dude, but he was like, you can just come work for me and run the family business. That's what you should do.
Yeah.
And at the time, my parents weren't going through a great time. I think they were actually in the midst of a divorce. So there was that side of it where it's no, you're not going to work for your dad. No, you shouldn't go to college. And ultimately I made the decision to go to college because it was one of those things where it's all right, I might as well go. And if I don't use it, I can always go back and work for my dad.
Yep.
And when I graduated college, I had no intent to go looking for a job. I went right back to work for my dad, and the intent was to work for him for a quote unquote a year. I made that number up, but go work for him and then figure out what I want to do. Do I want to go start my own company? Do I want to go build sheds all the time? Like I didn't really know. And the developer called me 2 weeks after I graduated college. And they called and said, hey, you know, so-and-so, we're so-and-so, we want to interview you. And I had declined. And they were like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, I'm just not interested. I told my dad I would help him out for a year, and then maybe I'll you know, maybe we can talk in the future. But, you know, that the commercial stuff doesn't really interest me. And a week later, he called. He goes, hey, man, like, I know you declined this, but I really want to interview you.
That's pretty cool. That's flattering, especially coming out of college, right?
Totally. And I'll never forget, like, I've never been to the city, like, at this point in my life. Like, I never drove into the city. And I kind of lied to my dad, and happened to be moving at the same time. So I told him I was going to take the day off to finish moving, which I did, but I also went into Boston for this interview and never have interviewed for a job except for like a carpentry job one time for another company during the summer. So I emailed this guy. I'm like, hey, I don't know what to wear tomorrow. Like the guy that's interviewing me. And he's like, dude, don't worry about what you're wearing. Just wear like, you know, khakis and a polo. You'll be fine. So I went out and bought khakis and a polo and the interview was at 9 a.m. So I'm like, I hear traffic's terrible. So I left at 6, and I'm in Boston at like 7:45. Yeah, 7:45 or something like that. And I sat in my truck for a while, and then I must have called. Maybe I texted him, but I had somehow let him know that I was there early. He goes, dude, come on in. We're good. Come on up. And I walked in the office and I meet him, and he goes, dude, your hands are filthy. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I try to like scrub them. And he's like, no, that's good. I'm like, okay. He goes, you can tell you're a hard worker. And I'm like, okay. Like looking back, I understood what he meant, but like in the moment, I'm like, I scrubbed my hands for like 6 hours before I got there.
And where did you go to college?
Fitchburg State.
Yeah. And now that you're a business owner and you're interviewing people, I'm sure all the time, you've got plenty of reps under your belt. It doesn't seem like as you grew up, you got advice on what to do in an interview.
No.
Like, now from your seat, like what advice do you have for like that entry level person coming out of school, going into interviews for their first time or not having success with interviews? Like what kind of things should they be thinking about?
You know what? That's an interesting question, because I was talking about people that have interviewed for me, and we just recently interviewed a kid that was still in high school. He was coming to be like an intern. He actually went to my high school. And I felt bad because he came in the office and he's sitting across from me and he's like tapping his foot and he's like physically nervous. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, dude, I know that me telling you this isn't going to be like what makes you calm down, but you really have nothing to be nervous about. This isn't something that you're going to get right or wrong. I just want to chat. And I think that it's super cool that you're here, and like it's just super casual. And I think that there's an unnecessary amount of pressure on like making sure you answer questions correctly. And I think that it depends on the field. Like, but entry level, like you're not going to answer the questions, right? Like you are very like you have like just be honest and be upfront where you're at. And to expand on that, I think that in a lot of interviews, people have fed me a lot of. Can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, okay. I'm all for
it. People have fed me a lot of bullshit, and in the interview it sounds great, and then they come in to work for us, and it's like, dude, like you said that you were proficient at this, like that's not you're not proficient at. You don't even know how to do it.
Yeah.
So I think the advice is, number one, understand that interview is likely probably just as nerve-wracking for the interviewer as it is for the interviewee. And number two, just try to approach that in a way that is comfortable for both of you guys and be super honest and upfront about your skill set and what you're looking to grow into. And I think about that from the client side too, where, I talk to a lot of people that want to grow their business, and they're like, I don't know how to promote that I want to build homes when I'm only building decks right now. It's like, well, have you ever like communicated to your prospects that, right now I've been building decks for the last 5 years, but my goal in my business is really to move into building homes. Well, no, I haven't. It's like, well, what do you think like, why not? Because if you had communicated that to a client, right? Hey, I'll build your deck, but just so you know, like, our goal is to end up building homes. They might say, hey, I didn't know that that was your goal. My neighbor over here actually just bought a lot and would love to build a house. Why don't I introduce you? People have this like misconception that they have to have done something before they do it. And that's the whole like issue. It's like, how do I have experience? How do I get experience if I can't be hired to get experience? Yeah. It's the same thing when you're selling yourself in a role or a job to a prospective client.
Yeah, it's good advice. The interviewee or the business owner trying to sell work. It's like, if you can identify your flaws, all right, sure, and you show self-awareness of where you're weak or unqualified, it builds confidence. So you go negative, 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 but here's the things I'm great at, and here's how I know I can overcome that lack of experience or that weakness. And it just shows awareness, resourcefulness, competence, right, to achieve a result over all hurdles. And that's something I love. And
also, like, outlining what you're not so great at and having the opportunity to work together to make you great at it. There's a great quote in I forget what movie that show was, House of Cards. And in House of Cards, Kevin Spacey's wife was like running for president or whatever at some point. But there was a point in that show, and I don't remember it exactly, but I remember the scene vividly, that they were like, well, you know, why would you ever be able to do this role if you've never done it? Something like that. Mm-hmm. And she looked at him and was like, you know, for what I lack in experience, I'll make up for in tenacity. And it's something along the lines of that. And I remember hearing that. I'm like, man, that's so good, because I've been faced with that question with clients where I interviewed for a $10 million single family home. I'm like, you've never built a $10 million single family home. And I would, in that moment, it's like, yeah, he's absolutely right. And do I try to bullshit my way out of it, or am I upfront and saying, hey man, you're absolutely right, but I can't build that $10 million one until I build that $10 million one. And I'm not saying that you need to be the first one, but you might be the first one. And for whatever I do lack in experience in building $10 million, I know I have the ability to do it because I have the resources to do it. It's very similar to building a $2 million house, just compounded. It's bigger. It's okay. It's more complicated. That's fine. I have my trades that I work with have done this before. They work on $15 million homes. Me personally, yeah, I haven't, but I also have a team of 15 people that work with us. Collectively, we've been building for many, many years. Some of them have built $20 million residences. So as a company, we do have the experience.
Perfect example. In that example, or let's say someone going to an interview that says, oh, you don't have this experience or this education, this degree, you don't have a grad degree or an MBA. It's like, well, what fears do you have, or what competencies do you think I lack because I don't have that experience or that degree? One, they probably won't have a good answer, but if they do, now you know, like, here are their concerns, and you can knock those down one by one on, is it your tenacity? Is it your drive? You can connect other experiences, willingness to learn.
Exactly.
In parallel examples of how you overcame a similar hurdle in another job, right?
Right.
Eliminate the perceived risk and move on. Yeah. So sheds, then you move on to development. When did you figure out, like, the entrepreneur life's for me, I'm going to go launch NS Builders? And what was like the first job that you did? How did you eliminate that risk and kind of take the jump to go on your own?
So there's a lot of pieces to this particular story, but I was doing side work constantly. I've told the story before where, I'd be working in Boston from 6 to 5 p.m. and then I'd leave, pick up dinner on the way to a job, and I'd work at night until midnight on something. Yep. And, to the point where there was a kitchen I was renovating, and I was literally renovating it at night because the house was vacant. So they were like, get it done whenever you can. And
that's awesome.
At the time I was dating this girl who now is my wife and the mother to my children. But, I always tell the story that she gave me the ultimatum that I needed to pick one or the other. She says that she never did. So we can stick with that story. But ultimately,
it was strongly suggested.
Yeah, I mean, I was working legitimately 100 hours per week. Yeah. And, every week, like Saturday and Sunday, all day. So and then, and because we're dating, it's like, yeah, my night, like I'm going out at night. And she'd keep me out till 2, 3 in the morning. I'd get up at 7, 8 and head out and go work.
Doesn't mean you get to sleep in.
No. And, ultimately it got to a point where I knew I needed to decide. And I had approached my boss and I was like, hey, I'm giving my notice. And strategically, I wanted to do it. So when I started my business, it was on January 1st. And I was
super important, right? The end of year deadline.
I was like, you know what? January 1st, that way my taxes aren't screwed up and I don't have to file for 2. Like, I don't even know why I made that decision, but that was my decision, right?
There's a lot of people that are scared of that end of year deadline. That's completely arbitrary.
You know what? That just to side story that for a second, you are absolutely right. And it's so even right, like even for myself, like sometimes like we'll look at our P&L on something like, man, we're like this, we're just not going to finish this year that great. And it's like, so? It's like, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we it doesn't stop. it keeps going.
This wasn't a 1-year game.
Yeah. So it is funny how like we put that pressure. And I mean, holidays I feel like have become so incredibly stressful personally and professionally that it just adds to it. But yeah, back to, so we, I tell my boss, hey, I'm giving my notice, and he's like, whoa, what's going on? I'm like, I'm going to go explore another option. That's what I said. So like in his mind, like someone hired me, and his boss's boss, his boss came in, like the senior VP. He's like, what's up? He's like, where are you going? Where are you going? Who's taking you? I'm like, oh no, I'm actually going to start my own business. I'm like, what? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to start my own business and I'm going to do carpentry. And they were like, all right. And he looked at me and said, listen, we, definitely sad to hear you go. But if it doesn't work out in a week, a month, a year, 5 years, just call me. Your job's here. And when he said that, I'm like, holy shit, I have nothing to lose here. And maybe like he could have just said that to make me feel great. Like, who knows? Yeah. But the point is that was just like this icing on the cake.
I imagine he meant it.
And yeah, and I think he did. He saw the value in what I brought to the table.
And how old are you here?
Oh God, 23, 24.
23, 24 when that happened. When you gave your notice and launched your business.
Yeah,
that's awesome. And something I admire, and I think a lesson for anyone that is like scared to take that leap, it's risky to launch your business, right? You outrun that risk when you're willing to work the 80 or 100 hours. You crush your day job and then you build your business on the side. Mm-hmm. And when you're willing and you know that you're capable of putting in that type of effort, there's no financial risk that you can't outwork. You just will put your head down and attack that goal.
And my dad always, like, whenever I ran into situations where I was like, what if I run out of work? He's like, you'll figure it out. Like, he always gave me that. I always say it's the best and worst advice, but he's like, you figure it out. Like, you've always figured it out. You've never not been able to make money if you needed money. Yeah. And fast forward to now, I've truly gotten to a point in my life that, when I'm considering doing something and I consider like, well, that's risky. It's like, sure it is. But, I feel like as a society, a lot of us make decisions based on the worst case scenario where it's like, I can't do that because I could lose my house. It's like, okay, that would suck. Or it's like they put, we had a bad client experience and they're like, what if they sue you? I'm like, man, that would suck. What if they sue you and put you out of business? I'm like, man, that would suck more. What if they put you out of business and they take your house? Man, that would suck 3 times as much. It's like all of that would suck, but I'm not basing my decision off that. No. It would be like, what if they decide to not sue you and decide to donate $1 million to you instead? It's like, man, that's best case scenario. Probably not going to happen either. The reality is it's going to be very, probably like, it will teeter to either good or bad, but it's going to be somewhere in the middle. And you can, and this is aggressive, but it's like, you don't die. Like your game isn't over. If they took my business, my house, my truck, everything from me, and I had to move in with my mother-in-law or my father, like at the end of I still have the opportunity to do it again.
you have the skills to do it again, right? Like, so God forbid this worst case scenario, like no one can take that experience and the competencies you've built and the new lessons learned that you can just do it again faster.
And I get it, Renz. Like, I get that it could be, completely debilitating to go through that. Like, even when
traumatizing for sure.
I mean, you get a bad email from a client that like threatens to sue you, like that hurts, and that will encompass your entire mind.
Oh yeah, you don't sleep or really do anything else.
But then you have to pull yourself out of that for a second and realize, but I have 6 other clients that love me, and this guy that doesn't love me and is threatening me is getting all of my attention. Why would I ever give someone like him all of my attention? He doesn't deserve it.
Yeah.
That's
a good lesson.
But it's so hard. It's so hard in the moment to realize that like you have to focus on the people that do deserve your attention. And yes, in the worst case scenario, all of it goes away. It's like, but the likelihood of that happening is largely dependent on your, again, tenacity to work through that. And if your tenacity folds and everything folds, okay, what is your choice now? Do you go, like, can you pick yourself back up? Are you going to be able to emotionally support yourself to do this again? Or do you try something different?
Mm-hmm. A lesson there, it's kind of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and you'll hear me talk about lifelong learning all the time, is we as people, we are naturally drawn to like think about and focus on the squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel is the bad employee, the bad coworker, the bad client, right? The people that are pointing the finger, blaming you. You worry about all them, and it's very easy to get distracted and give those people your attention and neglect your good clients, your good colleagues, your good coworkers, your good employees. And when you take a step back and reflect on that, you're like, I am doing this totally backwards.
Yep.
And I don't know that you can build that awareness unless you're going to masterminds, talking to peers, lifelong learning, listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks or reading, right? Like you got to invest in opening up your perspective to make sure you're focused on the wrong problems.
Yeah.
Because there might be an employee, a colleague, and a client that you can't fix. And so it's not worth wasting any energy over it, right?
Yeah, it's just to touch on that real quick. I'm reading a book right now called Oversubscribed. Great, amazing book. It really talks about creating scarcity around your product. But in the book, in one of the chapters, it talks about the sales process and how, like most business owners, they spend all this time getting the client to buy. The moment they buy, the owner is no longer involved. It's passed to the team, and then they're focused on the next person to buy. Where ultimately the result of that is the client, they bought the product, but their experience kind of sucked because the owner just kind of stepped away and let someone else take it from there. Where if you were to get them to buy and then, nurture them all the way through the process, that experience to them is something that they'll never forget.
Never forget. And
we oftentimes just forget, like we forget how important that is after they buy, and we just go right into, all right, who's the next person to buy?
Yes, especially when you're growing and you're small, right? Like seeing that experience through to the end also is an incredible feedback loop on how to improve the initial part of that engagement, right? The client experience, like staying with them through the end, seeing that through the feedback loop is like super valuable.
Yeah.
Let's transition to share more about, through your lens, like what is NS Builders all about, and like how do you differentiate yourself in the market?
So, I mean, I kind of alluded to the fact that we started as a carpentry company, but I called it NS Builders because I didn't want to be a carpentry company. I wanted to eventually build homes. I thought I would do that with a 1 or 2 person team, to be honest. I didn't expect to grow it into a company. And I think social media really is what drove me to build a company. People were attracted to working with us. People were attracted to working for me, growing my team.
Wow, so you started the social media investments like before you really built a bigger team in a business?
Yeah. Wow. I started social media when it was on my second job. I was building this deck. I'm just a carpenter. I had a helper, and I was just posting photos of it. and an interior designer reached out and said, hey, I saw your post on Instagram. It looks like you got a bunch of Fest tools, so I know you care about quality tools, and your work looks really great. Would you want to do a job for us? And I was like, what the hell is this about? I'm like, how'd you see my stuff on Instagram?
That's amazing.
And it was in that moment, right around that moment is when I realized, like, I just knew, okay, this is an opportunity for me to sell work. And that's when I was introduced to Gary Vaynerchuk and went down the rabbit hole of like seeing how he documents his process. And we had bought a house, and I was like, I want to film this whole thing. I want to film it start to finish. I ran out of money on that, so we got like 7 episodes. But but knew that there was value in it, and knew that, this is when Snapchat came out. So I was on Instagram sharing all the pretty stuff I was doing, or like a progress photo. But then I would be like, all right, go over to Snapchat and watch my story on Snapchat. I'll show you the behind the scenes, what's really going on. So that's when like the stories came, and then Instagram brought stories. So we moved back to Instagram, and then stories was this whole thing about like what was going on behind the scenes.
I give you a ton of credit. You were so early on this, and a lot of people, like if you think about it, you're on your second project, like so many people are focused on just doing the work and like trying to fill their time with, like at the time, if you're building decks or building sheds or building a house, 100% of your time is focused on building the house, and you forget to build the other parts of the business. So you were like light years ahead of your thinking, especially early on, like in super early on social media. I give you a ton of credit.
All right. So I've never actually made this relationship to something I did before my business, but before social media, there was message boards. That was the thing. Forums, and I was on a ton of forums. I was building this truck. I'm actually still building it. But
everybody that's building a truck is still building it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was building this. I tore this truck apart, and I started rebuilding it, and I was sharing it on the message boards. I was like, hey, here's my project truck. Follow along the build. And I love sharing what I do. Like it was always what I when people would come over, I'm like, hey, come check this out. I want to show you all the things I've been doing. Yeah. And so I was sharing it on the message boards. And so I would do every week, I would just update photos and like, this is what's going on, and get feedback from it. And I realized how valuable that was. I was like, hey, I see how you welded that. That's going to break. What do you mean it's going to break? It's like, well, it's doing this and it's doing that. You should redo it. Okay. Went out in the shop, cut it off, did it again.
Yeah.
And then I just realized that I could learn so much, and I ended up building 3 chassis from scratch on a frame table that I built that I also designed based on all of the geometry that I learned how to map out through like chassis fabrication forms.
That's awesome.
And so I think that is really where me sharing my work when it came to business stems from. Is because I loved sharing what we were doing, and also appreciated the feedback and the opportunity to get advice. Yeah. So it just was kind of the natural progression. Like now it's just something I'm doing it for work. And it just grew. And then the whole video side and stories and Snapchat, like that just became fun. Like I loved following Vaynerchuk and seeing what he was doing, and I'd be, walking through Home Depot, filming myself on selfie mode like an idiot, and like, oh, this is what I'm doing today. And like some people were like, all right, you're an idiot, just like do your work. And then other people were like, man, you're hustling like round the clock, dude. Like what's going on? And then others would be like, hey, I saw that you're using this. I've used that, and it's failed before. And then I'm like, all right, what do you use? I use this. Boom. I just learned something because I decided to share, what I was doing in that moment. And I realized how valuable that was going to be for the business. And, like I said, it's allowed us to grow from the clientele side, from the project side, and then from the employee side. But
That's awesome.
To answer your question, like what is NS Builders and how do we differentiate ourselves? We are really committed to creativity, collaboration, and quality. And it's really, our core values are empathy, passion, intentionality, craftsmanship, and collaboration. Like that's what it means to work with us. And we take all of those things very, very, seriously, because we want to approach building, especially in the custom world, in a very intentional way that the client feels as though we're always advocating for them but never sacrificing quality.
Yeah, it builds trust.
Right.
And I love that what you did so well with your core values is that they're short and concise, which means they're memorable for your clients and for your team. And if your team and you guys can use those in decision making, right?
So it spells epic with 2 C's.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Very
Not
nice.
that, and so that wasn't intentional. I actually
Come on.
I swear. So
I don't believe
I'm gonna peel the curtain back a little bit. So these core values were developed less than a month ago. We've been trying to develop them for a long time, and finally I was like, I need to just get this done. And we came up with those 5 words, and they were all in different order. And I Googled acronym maker, and I typed in those those letters, and it rearranged it and said, well, it spells epic, but it has 2 C's. I'm like,
that
love
is
it.
Clever.
Love
I
it.
like that.
Let's just roll with that.
That is super clever.
And so yeah, and I actually we have. I'm looking to the right of me, but I have all our brand statements printed out on these 24 by 36 posters, and the intent is to hang them in my office, but I don't even have room on the wall, so I'm not. Right now, they're just sitting here.
They'll have to be in the pile.
Yeah,
that's great. And I think you shared there that you've been working on them for a while. Some people can look at concise core values and be like, "Well, they picked 4 random words and threw them on their website." Like, to make them concise and actually impactful takes a ton of work. It takes a lot of thought. You go through a million cycles, all kinds of phrases. It's not easy work. So NS Builders, start posting super early on social media. Your first couple jobs were building a deck. Interior designer finds you, and you really quickly moved from that type of work to gut renovations, challenging work in downtown, working in a lot of Back Bay, and then really quickly to high end. I don't know what you use for a term, distinctive homes, like very expensive, like you said, $10 million homes, like super custom. So could you tell us a little bit about that progression?
Yeah. So my first job, right when I started in January, was a kitchen renovation. It was for good friends of mine. But when I decided to leave, the architect who worked at Elkis Manfredi, big firm in Boston, that was the project manager for the job, approached me and said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Oh, I'm going off my own." And, "Oh, what are you going to be doing?" And I told him, and he was like, "I just bought a house. You want to bid it? You want to bid the gut renovation on it?" And I was like, "Sure." And I actually went back and looked at what the contract was recently, and it was like $180,000. I was like, how the hell did I make any money? Like, it was a full gut renovation on this. Like, I'm like, I have no idea.
We all price them wrong to start. That's how you learn. But somehow you found a way to eat anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And because I'm like looking now, I'm like, that would be a $2 million job. Like, how was I 10x off? But so I started that gut renovation, and in between it, I was also like, because I was subcontracting a lot, I would oversee it, do all the carpentry, and then bang out a deck or go do a built-in, build the built-in in my shop at night, and then, and then install it at a later date. But when I completed that, he had recommended me to someone in downtown Boston. I did a gut renovation on their condo, and it just kind of stemmed from there. Like, at that point, like, I had enough to share on social media. I was reaching out to interior designers. One of our next jobs we had 2 jobs that followed that renovation in downtown, both in Boston, one being in the South End, one being over in the West End, actually Boston Harbor. And one was for a friend of my wife's. And then the other one was just a random person off Instagram saying, "I just want to renovate with you because I want to watch this thing happen on Instagram. I think it's so cool." And
awesome.
Had done those 2 jobs. And every job we were doing, I mean, there was no structure to how we were pricing or even, budgeting the job. We were just in there doing, like, getting it done. And, if things were going to take longer, it just took longer. It just meant that I'd made less money. And oftentimes
made the same money, it just took longer time.
Right. And, and ultimately there was all this reinvestment into, all right, if I'm going to lose money, I might as well lose money for something cool. So let's do something cool and take photos of it and market it for the opportunity that's in front of us. And I've always kind of done that. I did another renovation in Charlestown that led to a great job in Newton because of the architect, and we did this big renovation in Newton, and then we were able to start capturing like bigger picture projects. So like it wasn't so hyper focused on maybe a room, but it was like, hey, this is the whole house. And then when we started promoting that we were doing the whole house, then we could get bigger jobs. So for me, what I realized, especially probably in the last 2 years, is that there's an opportunity to promote what you're currently working on, honestly, to attract more clients like that. Because what happens with traditional marketing, is that you wait for the photos to be done. Say you build a house, then you get landscape. Well, you can't take photos of the landscape when it's planted. You got to wait 2 years for it to mature in, and then you get the photos. So now you're 3 years down the line before you get to take photos of that house and promote it like, hey, look what we built. Mm-hmm. So for us, we really wanted to get into the high-end custom world and ground up. Like, we'll never get away from renovations entirely, but the renovations are like we're changing our threshold every day as to like what our minimum is for a renovation in town. And what does that mean? Meaning like we're only doing a full gut. It's got to be complicated. It's probably going to be a couple $1 million. And because our management like demands that, we have a very expensive management model. But
that's so smart.
Well,
I think a lot of people, they don't do that when they try to scale, and it just hurts their entire company. It creates burnout.
Well, it's two different
quality
companies.
Product to their target market. You got to learn to say no to the stuff that doesn't make any more sense. And if I could highlight one of the things to think about in that decision, like you just pointed out, the renovation has to be at a certain scale, maybe a couple $1 million. So, hey, this is a really nice job, $500,000. Could you make money on it? Yes. Like you could do a budget and build something that made money. But if you think of the opportunity cost of not getting your target $2 million contract or $5 million contract, the gap is much bigger. Right? Because all that management time could have been spent on a bigger contract that was more aligned with where you're going in the company.
And in all the conversations I have with people that are in similar businesses is that, one of the things that is easy to misunderstand is that when you look at a job, it might be profitable. Every job might be hitting their numbers, but collectively, if you don't have enough cash for the business to perform, it doesn't matter how profitable the job is individually. If you don't have enough going on in volume, then you're overspending on overhead. So and so what it becomes is like this whole like game of how many projects can I do, and now it's like now I'm doing 15, $500,000 projects where I could be doing, 4 $2 million projects or something of the like.
Another example, I like to drive that message home. I say like not all $10,000 jobs are created equal. Mm-hmm. One $10,000 job could be for a client that maybe only does 2 or 3 jobs a year. So their annual client value is only $30,000.
Right.
But a $10,000 job might be with a client that's worth $1 million a year. Mm-hmm. So the time spent on that $10,000 contract is not the same value because you're thinking, again, it's not a 12-month goal. We're talking about a lifetime, like company life cycle value. You got to look at long-term stuff. So that's how you make better decisions in your business and allocate your resources.
And that's really that's why we really started pushing. Well, one of the reasons why we really started pushing to bigger jobs. And for us, we want to focus on the custom ground up. The home, like you said, distinctive homes. And what that means for us now and in the future, I think it'll be an interesting, another ladder climbed, I think, for us is that we're going to, really shift into developing a very specific product. So not only are we, building homes custom for clients, but the next few years, I think you're going to see a very intentional move towards a particular style of home. And, that will largely be due to the fact that I think we're going to buy and develop and sell. And in doing that, we start creating a very particular product that we're known for as the builder and great architecture. We'll be partnering with architects. And ultimately, if we can shift our focus to being primarily development, and then the customs that come are customs that are coming through the marketing of those developed projects. Meaning like, hey, I saw what you built, but I have a lot, or I want that house over here. And rather than buying a product, you know, they're hiring us for, you know, a custom. And that
such a brilliant shift.
Yeah. And it's, you know, what I realize is that we build beautiful projects, but my issue and concern with them is that they become so widespread in what they look like that when someone walks by a particular home, like, yeah, oh, that home is beautiful. Who built it? I'm not really sure. Like, I don't want that.
You don't know.
Right.
Like, who knows who built what house?
I want someone to walk by that house and be like, holy shit, I know exactly who built that house. Like, there's only one person that could have built that. And that's what I want to be known for from, like, you know, from the NS Builder side. And you talk about material millwork and motif media. Those are two really important parts to that bigger picture. Millwork is a great example of how you can push the level of creativity in spaces and interiors and things, and being able to have that in-house and work really closely through that gives us the opportunity to create a product that no one else has. And then, of course, motif is just capturing all of that.
Listening to this whole thing, and as I thought about your business model and where you were headed with it, it really struck me on the bank side of like high-end custom homes. It's hard to get comps. And
yeah,
when
so
you're
that's
playing
what we're
in that,
dealing
not
with
that
right now.
those people necessarily need to, but people that are making enough money to build a $10 million home, it's not because they're dumb, right? Like, they're financially savvy and they want to create leverage and make sure their capital is working for them to do more things. So they don't necessarily want to pay $10 million in cash for their house.
Right.
But it's hard to get a comp that you don't want to spend $8 million to build the $10 million. You want to get more debt on that house. And if you're able to develop, build, and sell these, you're going to almost create your own comps. And if it ties yourself to an NS Builder's home, that gives so much leverage against competition trying to, like, service that market. And I love that angle.
And I know we don't have the time today, but, like, there's a whole side of creating an authenticity behind our homes, like tying that to something like an NFT. Like, there's this whole
That is another conversation.
Well, there's also the I have this whole royalty plan. So essentially, like, as this stuff continues to transfer on market, like how we get involved with that. This is going to come off as very arrogant, but there's a part of this approach that we want to take. We want it to be a very high-end product. And there's this approach, and I got to find a better way to say this, but right now it's like, I want to be in a position where it's like, I am allowing you to buy this house. Meaning, like, you know, this is a piece of art. So this is, you know, you want the piece of art, the value is in what the perceived value, right? Is based on, like, how much value you see in this. And I want to approach it that way, where not because I'm greedy, not because I want to make, you know, incredible wealth off every single home. It's because I want to create a demand around a product that we are fortunate enough to put the amount of effort it truly takes in these homes, rather than squeezing every single dime out of our trade partners and in efforts to sell it at a discounted rate that client gets to buy and then hold on to for a year or 2 years and then go flip it and make, you know, $1 million. Just for the sense of, like, investing in that opportunity, where it's like, how do we share that royalty? But I mean,
NFTs are going to be that path to do it.
Yeah, and there's a whole authenticity side of it, but it's also tied to our home care program, which every home that we're building automatically comes with home care. And then, you know, there's
tell us a little bit about that. I haven't heard of that before.
All right, so it's basically, when we finish the job, like, you have that whole, like, quote unquote binder, like, here's all your owner manuals, here's what you got to do to keep warranty, and then, you know, the client calls you and tells you that you're a crappy builder because their sink's leaking or the roof leaks. It's like, have you cleaned your gutters? Well, no. It's like, okay, well, do you bring your truck back to GMC and tell them that GMC is a piece of shit because you haven't changed your oil in, you know, 90,000 miles? It's like, no, there's
great analogy.
And so what
I
do you
forgot to put gutter guards on my house, by the way, and I'm so frustrated by it. I need to go put those on immediately.
But you pay GMC, like you're either going to maintain your GMC yourself, or you're going to pay for the service from GMC. So we're looking at it the same way. It's like, how do we prevent these quote unquote warranty calls when they're not really warranty? They're just, they're not maintaining the home correctly. So then we end up with an issue, and then it falls within our warranty, so we have to pay for it. So we come to the table at the end of the job saying, here's what your home requires from a maintenance standpoint and equipment standpoint, and here are the aesthetic maintenance things that we would recommend. And we package that together. It might be $25,000 a year. And it's like, but for $25,000 a year, we will maintain your home. All of these things automatically scheduled. You'll have a home care tech on site. All of the trades will be scheduled around your schedule. We will oversee it, and we will produce a home report card every time we show up. So here's the Carfax report when you go to sell it. It's like, hey, yeah, my boiler, yeah, it's descaled every X amount of months. Now we're coming up before the winter time and in the springtime to make sure all the HVAC is all prepped and ready for that change in temperature. We're adjusting. When I talk about aesthetics, we go in and we do a yearly millwork adjustment because cabinets sag. We build the job. There's nothing in the cabinets. You put hundreds of pounds of plates in there. Now the doors rub, and they're pissed off. It's like, no. Well, you put weight in
This is so on brand, Nick. This is so on brand. Like the proactive piece, the trust, the quality, the thoughtfulness that goes into it. Like what a message that sends, and it protects your brand.
Exactly.
Right. Because when you're talking about servicing such a niche group of people, they're going to talk. Mm-hmm. And when they go to validate with someone that owns an NS Builder's house, it's not going to be, hey, the doors don't line up. It's only 6 months later. It's not going to be the gutters, like there's an ice dam. None of that's going to come up because you proactively thought about it. So it just reinforces the value of NS Builders.
There's a great real life example. Finished a job in Cambridge. He signed up for home care. We went there to do our prep for winter. Fired up the heat. Heat didn't seem to kick on correctly. Opened up the boiler, realized one of the pumps was bad. Ordered the pump, came in a week later, replaced the pump, all before the cold came. And it's like, hey, brand new boiler. We never had the heat on because we just finished the job. Had a bad pump in it, got replaced, all taken care of. Heat works. Now that, in that moment, there's no reaction. There's no, the client's mood only can go up from that. It's like, oh my God, thank you so much for making sure that was done. Now, if we didn't have that, what would happen to the mood?
I know I would have been pissed.
Yeah. This is brand new. What the F, man? And it would have been like, oh, and then it's like, you guys used a shitty plumber. Like, I don't trust you guys. Like, it just dwindles. And now you're trying to fix and like react to it, where it's like, that was a great example. And I'll use that forever because it was just a perfect example as to why this is important. Let us take care of your home. Let us maintain your home. When people come over, we want people to look around and see this home. It's clean. It's operating correctly. Everything is in great shape. And it's like, who built this? Oh, it's NS. The paint, we include yearly paint touch-ups in that price. So we have 8 hours of paint touch-up. So, and we want clients having the house outside looking good, inside looking good. People are going to be coming over. And then, whatever, someone comes over and is like, man, this room looks great. Oh yeah, my builder came last week to do touch-ups. It's like, what?
Who's that?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before.
Exactly.
That's
That's where I think you tie
Brilliant,
the utility to like something like an authenticity certificate, aka an NFT. But there's the utility version of it, and and then also that's how we help maintain the brand behind what a NS Builder's house is.
This is awesome. Yeah, I love this entire angle. You are such an innovative thinker. Yeah, you are so far ahead of the pack in the way you think about your business, your strategy, your team, and you really are client first, right? I know I've heard the rub, or people can very easily say like, no house or no build should cost that much money. Like, how could a house be $10 million? And it's like, it's not just about the build.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the experience, the trust, like
It's
knowing.
very much about the experience.
It's so much experience. It's not about the cost of a 2x4 versus another one.
Right. Because we're all paying the same for material. We're all paying very similar price on labor. It's, and we've had the talk too. We're expensive. Like, and people have, we've interviewed for jobs and they're like, dude, I can build that house for like almost half the cost per square foot. It's like, that's fine. If this is white glove. Like, you work with us and we're holding your hand all the way through the process.
White glove.
The communication is so thorough that you will have every piece of information. You everything from the box of screws that we just bought to the submittal on the doorknob on your kid's bed. Like, everything is documented at such a high level, but there's a cost to that. And that's in our general conditions. That's in the site super that's on site, the project manager that's on site, the director of ops that oversees that, the construction admin that is doing all the paperwork to make sure it's all there. But all of that information is so your experience is at a peak all the way through.
Yeah.
And
which
when
is so
not,
important to the clientele that you're serving, right? You're eliminating every single unknown. There's no wondering when you work with NS Builders. You know exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah.
You and I really think could chat all day. We're already at an hour. I know I'm always told, like, try to get these down to 45 minutes. I was like, these people are cooler than that.
Yeah.
I think we could literally do another one, and maybe we keep riffing or get another one going after this. We'll have a bonus episode or some more design development shorts on YouTube. Those are hot.
There you go.
But I want to kind of close out. So what can we expect from you over the next 5 years? It seems like it's like this development. You got more of this home service, like maintenance program. You have Materia Millwork and Motif Media. They launched, was it this past year, 2021 or 2022?
Yeah. Actually, right at the beginning of the tax year. Yeah.
Exactly. It was on the first. I remember you promoting that. First of the year, big announcement.
Yep.
2 new companies. Let's share a little bit about those. So you were doing all of this stuff in-house, right? You had internal media people working for you, producing all of this content, videoing your jobs. You had an interior shop to do all of your own custom millwork. And so what made you branch those out and create 2 new companies?
Couple of reasons. We'll start with Motif. So Doug owned his own company before he came and worked for NS Builders, and there was a lot of running a company he didn't like. He likes being a creative. He doesn't like doing invoicing and chasing people for money and paying bills, that you deal with on the business side. And
super fun.
Yeah, it sucks. But I knew that Doug deserved ownership in what we did because he was such a big part of it. So we talked about it and we were like, let's split this off as its own company. And, for 2022, it was very much just an NS Builders, Materia, and Modern Craftsman support. It took a few small jobs. We were going to promote it bigger than that, but it was just Doug, and we just hired another full-time marketing assistant that's going to help doing some additional producing on the podcast. But that's the first full-time employee that we've hired in this past month, and we're going to continue to grow, and it will be an opportunity to really share what we're doing from a media perspective with other brands. But it was really to get Doug the ownership. Obviously, from a tax perspective, there's what they are specifically, I don't know, but like there was tax benefits. There was definitely insurance benefits.
Yeah, separating liability is always
liability
smart.
Was huge. So we just really wanted to have the opportunity to also grow that as its own business and be super profitable in its own way. Same thing with Materia. Ken, he kind of always wanted to own something, and he was such a big part of bringing cabinet making into NS Builders. And, we ultimately got to a point where it's like we kind of danced around the idea of creating a partnership for a long time. And, frankly, it took a while. But now it's, again, it's just similar to Motif. I wanted Ken to have ownership. But I also wanted the ability to grow Materia into its own business. It was only doing NS Builders, so there was this like crazy like ebb and flow of like work and and like
you've already bought all the equipment and built the shop, right? Like now you have a partner, you invested in someone, and now you can fill use it to its capacity.
Right. And frankly, like, we're only just now doing the first NS Builders projects of the year. Like, we've done small stuff, but like big projects. Everything else has been for other builders, direct to client, which we were doing direct to client before, but it was like, wait, I'm hiring NS Builders to do a piece of furniture?
And for anyone listening that still isn't quite bought in on the importance of creating like brand awareness and demand through like content and social media presence, how long did it take you to fill up your year calendar with material millwork?
5 weeks.
5 weeks, and they got a year's worth of backlog, completely flooded their shop.
Yeah, $1 million worth of work.
And like to your point, you didn't have a real big job for NS Builders until right now. So we're talking a calendar year later. But you leveraged an entire built out shop and a team to create a year's worth of business in 5 weeks. How cool is that?
Yeah.
That's the power of content.
Yeah. And it's cool, man. I'm excited. So 5 years, like, growing Materia, Motif, Modern Craftsman is going to be this hub of information, and NS Builders, really just finding our niche. And it's something that you and I have talked about off air, but, when I say that we want to get into development, we want to do some really awesome single families, but I think that, in 5 years from now, if not sooner, we'll be doing some multis. And, and when, there's the word that's used around the city, it's like luxury apartments. It's like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, that luxury means nothing. We really want to build a luxury product, very boutique. So maybe that project can be, maybe you can build 15 units there, and maybe we come in and we build 7, and they're just like really cool, like really, really cool.
I hope if there was a man to do it, it's you. I can't wait to see that come to life. That's pretty cool. So I asked the 2 same questions to close out each episode. You already mentioned a book. I'm already losing track, but what's the top book you've read this year that you'd recommend?
It's the one I'm reading now, Oversubscribed.
Oversubscribed.
I really like it. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. I mean, I can rattle off a bunch of books, but let's
Oversubscribed. We're running with that. It's not something I've read, but I'll definitely put it to the list. And best advice you have for emerging leaders?
Humility. Honestly, I think that, we didn't even talk about the Jocko event, but
it's on my list.
I know it.
I have way more to talk about.
No one ever gets through that list with me because I talk so damn much. But no, humility is really important, and I think that a lot of leaders try to take this alpha approach and thinking that being alpha you can't have humility. And for me, I've really tried to make a conscious effort to be very self-aware and approach my team and everyone that works with us and for us in a way that, gives them the opportunity to, explain themselves. Like, walk me through what you're thinking, get them to try to get to the solution without me just jumping in and, here's the answer. Because ultimately, as a leader, my job isn't to tell someone what to do. It's to lead people to make great decisions. And, oftentimes it's quote unquote easier to do it ourselves. That's fine, but it's a very short-sighted approach.
Nick, that's such great advice. There's a shift in every business leader, at least the ones that continue to grow and scale. At first, you think it's all up to you, and you're the micromanager. All information and decisions flow through you, and it's hard to make the transition because you see other people do something not quite as good as you, right? Or so you see, hey, I'm losing $1,000 here, $5,000 there, $10,000 there. I need to go work extra hours and take on that task. Like, my people, good people are hard to find, right? You start blaming other people. When the big aha is recognizing that your role is actually to invest in those people, and those people haven't made the same mistakes that you have. So to think that they have already walked the path and already learned that mistake is hard. But you need to look at it as, I'm building a people and a team that are going to help carry our company to the next scale, and this is a part of it. That's an investment in the future value of my team and of the company.
And you know what? And I think that just for what it's worth, you hear like, oh, I got to invest in my people, but it takes too long. It's like, how many investments are you making that turn around and give you, an immediate profit? Like none. Like very, very few.
And if they do, it's like an added benefit. You should never be making a decision on some like a short-term gain.
Right. Or if they do, it's like there's a big part, like 10% luck was involved, right?
Correct.
Where it's like, no, real estate, stocks, like whatever you're investing in, it's time. Like you're putting it there as an investment to eventually see a benefit. And, yes, it would be ideally a financial benefit. But, there's plenty of investments that people don't make money on or break completely even, and the benefit from it, it might fall in another category of freedom or stress relief, or maybe it doesn't do any of that. But the point is like you just said, invest in people. It's like invest in people, but have the patience to understand that investment's going to take some time.
Yeah, exactly. Like that manager that's making mistakes on the execution this year that maybe doesn't make much money or loses money. Mm-hmm. Could be the person that runs a team that executes $3 million of work in 2 years.
Exactly.
Right. So get rid of that 1 year time frame. Start thinking longer term and think of it as enterprise value in people. Nick, I know people that listen here, if they don't already know you, they're going to want to follow you and see what you do. So where's the best place that people can find you, get in touch, all that stuff?
You can find primarily Instagram or our website at nsbuilders or nsbuilders.com. And then my personal one's at Nick Schiffer and nickschiffer.com. So
awesome. And you are a podcast host, much more seasoned than I. That's the Modern Craftsman.
Yeah, Modern Craftsman podcast.
On all major platforms.
All platforms.
And YouTube now, right? YouTube Shorts,
yeah.
Wherever you get information, like you can find Nick there. When do you release episodes?
We drop an episode every Sunday night, Monday morning.
Sunday night and Monday morning, or
no? It's technically Monday morning, but a lot of guys we actually
recognize that you put it up on Sunday night and listen.
Yeah, and we'll get tagged, and I'm like, man, some people they listen to this stuff at like 11 o'clock at night. So yeah, every Monday morning. So.
Nick, can't thank you enough for coming here today. Like, I love your story, your drive, your strategic thinking. You're truly one of a kind. So I wish you the best going forward, and can't wait to see where you go. Thanks again.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Thank you so much for listening. If you found any value in this conversation, please like, share, and comment so we can get the word out to more people. It's the only way these communities grow. We're going to really change the industry. We're a growing community. Would love you to be a part of it. Please connect with us. We're going to be on all major social platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram. So all those links will be in the show notes. Enjoy the day.
Putting a lot out on social media, they were like, Lisa, that's not what top CEOs do. And I remember somebody really high level telling me that one. And that's changed. Now you see top CEOs really having a presence. Brands of the leadership of any company at all are more important than they've really ever been.